Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown. And today we got the news that the rape conviction of Harvey Weinstein has been overturned. And one of my patrons emailed me and said, "You're not going to like this. If you haven't seen the news yet, you're not going to like this." And I actually do like this. And I'm going to get into an explanation of why. And I call this this video an unpopular opinion. So for all of you who think I do things just for the clicks, I'm pretty sure this is not the brightest video for me to make. And if you're new to the channel, please do like and subscribe before you, and then watch the video, and you can choose to unsubscribe if you like. But do subscribe to my channel because there's a lot of cases that I analyze and a lot of issues that I do discuss when it comes down to evidence. As a criminal profiler, I am most concerned about evidence in the criminal justice system, being able to analyze crimes well enough to then arrest somebody properly, convict them with enough evidence so that the world is a safer place. Now, why do I have a problem with his conviction? I have a problem with 4 people's convictions in the recent past. His, Harvey, Bill Cosby, Donald Trump, and Brett Kavanaugh. 4 of them. And I thought each one of them was incorrect. And I was quite appalled because I thought all 4 ended up being considered guilty and being convicted or suffering the consequences thereof because they had no way to defend themselves. And yet there was no evidence actually presented in those trials or hearings. What do I mean by this? All right. The MeToo movement, in my opinion, has gotten out of control. I understand entirely that women for many generations and probably hundreds of years, maybe from the dawn of time, because they are the physically weaker sex for the most part, and also have to go through pregnancy and they're raising more likely raising the children, and therefore the economic circumstances are less. They end up in a situation where oftentimes they are taken advantage of emotionally, physically. All kinds of things happen to them, and sexual assault is one of those things. And it's very, very sad when you look over history. If you want to change culture around the world, well, we have to work at that. But I don't think we should change to change things by convicting people, whether it be in a court of law or just destroy their lives in other ways without evidence. Now, what do I mean by evidence? And a lot of people think that evidence is a person's statement. No, a statement is a statement. It doesn't mean the statement is true. So when a sexual assault happens, what should happen when somebody is sexually assaulted is that they go immediately to law enforcement, go to the police and file a report. Now, some people will say, well, it's a hard thing for a woman or sometimes a girl, even a young man, or doesn't matter what sex you are, you can be sexually assaulted. For them to go to the police and it's scary, it's uncomfortable. They think maybe nothing's going to come of it, and they're just going to be humiliated. All these things are true. But the problem is, if you don't file a police report, at that point in time, you effectively are, one, not actually stating at that time that a sexual assault happened. You prevent any kind of investigation. You would prevent any kind of physical evidence. You simply disappear into the night, and that information is never logged in or proven. And if this person goes on to sexually assault other people, there's no evidence even that has been filed with the police over time, which will be very helpful. If 2 women have actually filed police reports at different times, even if nothing came of it, the 3rd person comes in and files another police report, at least there's actual evidence that somebody filed police reports. That is a kind of evidence, not necessarily that it was proven that what they said happened. But if you don't say anything, for years. In my opinion, it isn't quite right to show up 5, 10, 20 years later and point a finger and say, I was sexually assaulted by this person. And I'm going to tell you my story. And because I tell you my story, and it sounds sad, you should believe the story. When Kavanaugh was accused of touching a woman, not even raping, but touching a woman inappropriately during a party when he was basically a teen, from years and years ago, and now she has a book out on the market too. What's he supposed to do? How can he defend himself? You're supposed to have the right to be able to defend yourself. You can't defend yourself over somebody's claim of 20 years ago. This is absolutely impossible. And so, you can only say, hey, I didn't do it. But President Trump had the same problem. Some woman comes out of the woodwork and says, oh, where was I? I was at a department store and we chit-chatted and he snuggled up, and then we went into a back room when nobody saw us, and he pushed himself on me. Is there any proof of that? Zero. But she gave this story and he paid for it, but he couldn't defend himself. Whether you like him or you don't like him doesn't matter. Do I like this guy, Harvey? No. And I'll tell you a little bit about Hollywood, because this is me. I was 19 years old and I was in Hollywood. And there is a thing called the casting couch. And it still goes on today. And that kind of casting couch also kind of exists in other professions. You might be working for some kind of multinational company, and if you sleep with a boss, you might get promoted. Same thing in politics. There's a lot of people sleeping with a lot of people. And a lot of times it is the person with less power sleeping with the person with more power, because the person with more power says, hey, the person will say, yes, I get to have sex. And the other one's like, maybe I'll get the deal I want. I can increase my income. Well, that's called prostitution. But hey, we're not, it's oddly enough, when a person willingly has sex with somebody in the context of business or in Hollywood, it's considered that they were taken advantage of. Not that they were trying to also take advantage of the person they were having sex with, because it's a power imbalance. Well, it's still not sexual assault. It's sleazy, but it's not sexual assault. And how does this all work? Well, when I was in Hollywood, I knew a whole lot of girls who were sleeping with a whole lot of producers and actors. Why? Because they knew that was a way they might get a job. Now, they never were promised the job. They had to sleep with a lot of people and maybe get one. So all of a sudden they're like, hey, we're going to go shoot out of town. Oh, I like that girl. She was good in bed. And they take her along and she gets into the union and she has some success and moves up in Hollywood. I decided not to sleep with anybody. I got nowhere. Now, mind you, maybe I wasn't talented either, but I do remember one party I went to with a producer, and we were sitting there, and I don't know how accurate my memory is, and that's why, again, in a courtroom situation, you cannot believe that the person saying something happened 10 or 20 years ago is necessarily viewing it accurately in their own mind. We have sometimes vague memories, especially if we were drinking, or we just don't remember it the way it actually happened. My memory is I was in the house of Richard Dreyfuss, the actor Richard Dreyfuss. I don't actually know that it was his house. I just remember it that way. And there was a basement. He wasn't there. He was out of town, and this is my memory. He was out of town, and some reason some friend of his was able to use his house. Maybe he had a bunch of houses. I don't know. And we were sitting in this place. I can still see this room with all these couches, and there was a swimming pool with a glass side, and the girls were swimming, some of them naked, in the pool like little mermaids, and they were passing around a bowl of something, and it was handed to me by the producer I was sitting with. He goes, "Here, have one." And they were drugs of some sort. And I said no, and I think they were Quaaludes. This was probably in the early, somewhere in the 73, somewhere around there. And I said no. And the other girls went, and they popped them really quick. Why? Because they knew they were going to be having sex with somebody that night in order to get themselves into the Hollywood life and get famous. And that Quaalude took the edge off so that they could just go ahead and do it, even if the guy wasn't terribly appealing. Bill Cosby, the claim that he raped the women, there's no proof of that. Did he maybe give them Quaaludes? Sure, but they probably took them willingly, because that's what happened. Hey, you come to my house, my wife's out of town, we're hanging out. What do you think you're doing there? You're there because you want to get something from him, and he wants to get something from you. So he says, how about a Quaalude? And you go, okay. And then you have a hazy memory, but you're just like, whatever. And you have sex. And years later, you have a chance to join the MeToo movement and say, this guy raped me. Not this guy, but the Bill Cosby guy, but this guy too. No, they're horn dogs. They're taking advantage of their power. Sure. I can totally imagine that he might have invited me. Well, come over. We'll talk about a part for you. And if I'm stupid enough and go to his hotel room, I should know what's going to happen in the hotel room. And so he thinks, well, if you walk in my door, you know what's going to happen. So he's drinking. He's got his drink in his hand. He goes, look what I got for you. And he whips it out. And the question is, do I have sex with him because I wanted what I wanted? It maybe gross me out or whatever. But then years later, oh my God, I can say he raped me. Because he can't prove he didn't. I can't prove he did. But if I can tell a sad enough story, it will work. And it does. It's amazing. And my proof of this is that one time on my blog, The Daily Profile, I'll link it below, I told the story of what happened to me in Hollywood. And one time on I think it was one of my hangouts, I also told the story. And the story was this, I was on the set of Cheech and Chong. And I definitely was on the set of Cheech and Chong. And I was asked to stand in for the main actress. She was getting her hair done, and I was underneath the covers in a bed with Chong, and they put the covers over my head because I was a stand-in, and so they didn't want to see me. I was supposed to be a lump, and so they were filming, and so I told the story, how I was under that cover, and while I was under there, Tommy Chong I felt his hand on my leg, and I was only 19 years old, and I felt his hand go up to my private parts, and he started touching me, and I was under there. I didn't know what to do. I was 19. Tommy Chong was a famous actor, and there were people in the room, and I just had no idea what the heck to do. And so he did what he wanted to do, feeling me up and whatever. And then when they said cut on that scene, and they said, okay, we're done, I threw the covers off of me, pulled my clothes down, and jumped up and ran away. And I left Hollywood at that point, and I told my family about it. My father and my sister, why I left Hollywood. My father's dead. My sister will confirm that this is what happened, because she'll remember I told her this story. And it's a complete lie. That is a complete lie. I didn't do it with all the tears. I did it the other day because I acted much better then, because I've done this too often. I don't cry as well anymore. But I wrote this blog telling the story, trying to make the point of how easy it was for people to fall for things. And I got a call. First of all, I got all these comments that said, oh my God, Pat, I'm so sorry that you went through this. And I'm like, what? And then I got a call from one of the top lawyers in the United States, very top, because I've done work with him on the Nancy Grace show. And he called me up and said, Pat, I'll represent you against Tommy Chong. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That was a fake story. I was doing it to prove a point that a woman can make up a story, or a man can make up a story. It doesn't make it true. You can say, oh, my sister confirmed it, but I might have lied to my sister all those years ago. And my father's dead, so we don't know if I ever told him anything. And maybe I'm just a big fat failure in Hollywood, and now I want to make some money off of Tommy Chong. So I had to put a disclaimer up and say, look, Tommy never touched me. Tommy was a total gentleman. And Tommy Chong did nothing. And I was shocked how many people fell for that. And I wasn't even trying that hard. I wrote the story like in 5 minutes, and people fell for it. If I can do that in 5 minutes, and can you imagine when the Me Too movement goes, and there's these lawyers, certain lawyers running around, and I won't mention their names, pulling in people to say he did it to me too. And they all have a story. Now, a lot of them, interestingly enough, along with not reporting it at the time, continue to see him, even continue to be with him physically. And it's like, and same him Bill Cosby, the same thing. It's like, if that guy raped you, and I have been sexually assaulted once in my life when I was 13. I wasn't raped, but I was attacked in a fun house when I was 13 in the dark. And I was grabbed and, shall we say, molested. And I managed to escape from the fun house, slamming into walls. But when I got out, I had no idea who it was because there was somebody behind me. So no, I didn't report that to my parents or the police because it wasn't going to do me any good. But I do remember the feeling. So my heart is with women who have suffered sexual assault. And I also used to work in hospitals, and I interpreted sign language interpreting for women who had been sexually assaulted and raped. And there were two types. Some were just, I got drunk and don't really remember whether I said yes or no. And they come in and they would like do this. They would talk to the doctor and get the rape kit done and then go out to Denny's for breakfast. Like they really weren't that bent out of shape. So they're like, I've had another woman used to come in there. She claimed, and within 2 nights, she claimed 2 different rapes. She was a psychopath and Munchausen syndrome. And she claimed she was raped by two different guys in 2 different nights. And I interpreted both times. And the second time I'm like, wow, you were raped again? She goes, yeah, can you believe it? And I was like, not really. And then I remember interpreting for a woman, a young student. It was a student. She went to a party and she went to the bathroom. There's a party of all deaf people. She went to the bathroom, and on the way to the bathroom, a guy came up behind her and grabbed her in the back and threw her in a side room. And he raped her. And of course, she screamed. It didn't do any good because everybody was deaf. He did rape her. And she was at the hospital. And all she said constantly over and over again was, I want my mommy. I want my mommy. I want my mommy. That still gets me. She was raped. I don't know if they ever prove anything, but she was raped. So there are women who go through some of the worst situations with sexual assault. But there are women who lie. There was a case where police arrived. They got a call from a pregnant woman. She was 7 months pregnant. She said her boyfriend's friend came over and raped her. And they got to the location, and there was a guy sitting out on the step. And they said, "Do you know where this woman is?" And he said, "Yeah, she's inside." They went inside to talk to her, and she said, "Yeah, that guy outside raped me. He sexually assaulted me. He raped me." And they're like, "Okay, the guy's still out there, so let's go talk to him." They went out there and they said to the guy, "Did you rape her?" And the guy goes, "I didn't rape her." And he goes like this, picks up his phone, and he's like, "Here, watch this video." And he holds up a video, and everybody's like, okay, we're done here. He had proof he didn't rape her because it was on the video. But she was who he raped me. So the police have dealt for a lot of times situations where people truly were raped, people were lying about being raped, sometimes women, men, whatever. Sometimes they will get drunk and not remember and then claim rape. Sometimes they will have sex with a guy and they just didn't like it. And they'll say because they're like, oh man, that was so humiliating and awful because he was a lousy liar. They'll claim he raped them. There are women who have sex with somebody else's, they're in a relationship like this woman they don't want to admit they had sex with somebody else and they'll claim they were raped. There are some girls who, like teenage girls who missed their curfews and will claim they were raped. That's why they didn't get home on time. There's enough of this going around where it's so sad for absolute true victims of sexual assault and rape because they have been through one of the worst experiences in their life. And yet there's false reporting going on around them, which is pretty appalling. So to me, what is most important is, first of all, we take those false reporters down because if they come in and there's evidence they were not sexually assaulted, they should go to jail. And then for the ones who were sexually assaulted, we should work overtime to try to right away be sure we have the physical evidence and every other kind of evidence we need to take that sex predator to court and put him away so he doesn't harm others. But we also have to be sure that we don't make accusations against somebody 10 to 20 years later. And when they can't defend themselves, even if they're a scumbag, even if they're 100% scumbag, bad behavior, perverted, anything you want to call them. I don't care what you want to call them. But if we're going to be a country that convicts people on evidence, We cannot also accept that we'll convict people because some women come out and say, this guy did this to me, when we can't prove he did. It could have been consensual sex that wasn't very pleasant. It could be consensual sex because she wanted something from him, like a part in a movie, and now she's mad she didn't get it. It could be a lot of things. He could have raped her, but if there's no proof that he did, there is no business in our courtroom for people to be convicted on no evidence other than a story that somebody gives a decade later. I don't care if it's 10 stories from 10 different women, because those lawyers are very clever. You know, sometimes they will pull in, since the MeToo movement, they'll even announce it like, hey, this guy, he's a pervert. He's a sex predator. Were you attacked by him? Sorry. Well, I gotta take a swig out of my very large Diet Pepsi bottle. And if they ask the question, and if by that time enough people have some clues of how he behaves, what the other claims were, well, I'll make a similar claim, and that should be sufficient. No, it shouldn't be. There should be proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and stories are not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, no matter how much you dislike the person who's in the courtroom. We have that standard theoretically for homicide. You can have a creep and a half and think, God, that guy is probably a murderer. But is he the one who committed that offense, even if you don't like him? And this is, to me, unacceptable behavior, that we've taken people to court without solid evidence. And I was not happy with the accusations, and I was not happy with some of the results of those accusations. Do I like this guy? Heck no. Sorry. What's in my throat now? One more time. I don't edit, so there you go. I may wish the worst for this guy, but I don't wish the worst by misusing the legal system. That I'm opposed to. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. After I finish coughing again, please put your thoughts below. Please be respectful. Please no politics. And please do subscribe to my channel and like the video, even if you didn't. But I'm trying to point out the issue of due process and evidence. And say my heart is with women who've been sexually assaulted and what they've gone through, and for men who've been sexually assaulted, children who've gone through sexual assault. It's a terrible, terrible thing. But on the other hand, there are men who've been accused of sexual assault who've gone to prison for assaults they didn't commit. And I'm worried. I don't like that for them either, because I have a couple sons, and I certainly don't want somebody coming out of the woodwork and saying, hey, he sexually assaulted me 3 years ago. Here's my sad story. And one of my sons goes to prison because he can't defend himself because there's no way to. And the jury decide they liked the story. No, I don't like that. And I don't like, most of all, that we misuse our justice system and we do not follow the rules that we should be following for proving somebody guilty. And that should be evidence. 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 Anyway, thank you very much for being here. And we'll see what happens with, he's probably going to go back to trial, but let's see what happens. Bye.